Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to RBN Television and this edition of Coffee with Joe. I'm Joe Osamendi, your host. But once again, I must remind you that's not the most important thing. The most important thing in this show is the guy I'm going to introduce you to in a couple of seconds, because this is a really fascinating subject that's so topical for right now. So let's get on with it right away. Paul Hacker, welcome to Coffee with Joe.
Good to see you again.
Oh, my pleasure. Second time you've been here?
Second time.
And Paul, you're a professional liability broker.
Yes, sir.
With Access Insurance Services, right? Mm-hmm. And your specialty is cybersecurity.
Yes.
Correct? Why don't you come, you were on before.
Yes.
And, why don't you give us a background into what cybersecurity is all about and kind of what we talked about before?
Sure. So the first session we did in
January.
January, yeah. I can't believe it, right? It's May,
Yeah,
right?
right.
What happened? So in January, we talked about what's going on, why are we in cyber issues? Why are we having cyber issues today? So we talked about kind of where we were 5, 6, 7 years ago when cyber insurance came out. Mm-hmm. And then after, when COVID hit, all these claims occurred, ransomware claims and data breaches.
Right.
And carriers really got hit hard. So before it was easy to sign up for insurance, you just need a couple of things, and you got the quote.
Right.
After COVID, it got very difficult to get those quotes. The carriers were hurting, and they got hit pretty hard with claims. So to make up for that, they limited their limits, and they increased their premiums, and they became very selective.
Okay.
So what they should have did 4 or 5 years ago when they first started doing cyber insurance, they should have asked the questions they're asking now. Mm-hmm. So this session, we're going to talk about what can you do as an employer or an individual to prevent yourself to get hacked, for a lack of a better term.
Right.
So the things they should have did back then is they should have did multi-factor authentication. It's a big word, right? I'm looking at you, correct? Right. Okay. So multi-factor authentication, basically what that means is it is a way, a means to prevent a hacker to get, once they get your credentials, they can't go anywhere else to get into your system. Mm-hmm. So multi-factor means that you have a separate code to get in.
Correct.
So you call in, you type in a code you receive either on your cell phone or an email so that you can get in. The analogy I used before was they could probably get to the castle, but they can't get into the castle, they don't have the keys. The key is the MFA, or multi-factor authentication. That's the first thing. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about some of the things you can do as an employer to prevent and to limit your exposure to potential hacks and or ransomware events. And ransomware, just to jump back, what ransomware is that somehow someone in your organization, and this just changed, I want to talk more about that too. Okay. Someone clicked on an email, and they clicked a document in the email that they thought that was legitimate, and that released malware or maliciousware into the system. Now that the hacker could do one of two things. They can lock you up with ransom, which means your screens go black or blue, and they say you can't do anything beyond using your computer until you pay X ransom. And years ago, ransoms were $10,000, $20,000. Today, ransoms range between $1 and $2 million.
Really?
And that varies as you get larger. As a larger employer, you're going to see higher ransoms. But we see the average ransom for an employer, small to mid-size, is $200,000. That's just the ransom. Then you have to check check your systems for, was there any viruses still in the system? Did they steal any data? So there's a lot of steps that have to be taken. That costs a lot of money. And that's the beauty of having cyber insurance. Cyber insurance allows you that have that coverage, that legal coverage, first of all. You have a quarterback coach called a data breach coach. And that data breach coach knows all the different rules and regs for each state, all the penalties.
Sure.
So they monitor and manage that whole thing. Right? So that's one piece. So your rent could be $200,000, but your entire bill could be $2 million. After they do forensics, they do everything. You may have to throw out your whole system and start over if it's infected. So that's kind of where we were, and what we got to do today to prevent that is, like I just said, the first thing is MFA. The second thing, now we have a checklist that I shared with your staff, and we can always share with
11 points, right?
Yeah, 11 checklists or 11 steps or 11 points, what have you. You don't have to do every single one of those, but I think the key ones are as follows. We just talked about multi-factor authentication. And the next thing is really educate your employees.
Sure.
Because we just talked to previously we talked to someone, and she said that she was hacked.
Yeah, her Facebook account.
Facebook was hacked. That's one individual. So So you have to train, because people don't know. Maybe you're expecting an email. Maybe you ordered something from UPS, and now they're sending you a notice, and you have to open it up.
Right.
Well, if it doesn't look legitimate, I mean, there's things you can do, and we can teach you that. There's companies like KnowBe4 is a cyber awareness type of company to teach employees.
Okay.
But you find ways to identify. There are certain things that look maybe legitimate about an email, but maybe the email address is wrong.
That's what I always look for.
Maybe there's misspellings. You know, not to be derogatory or anything, but sometimes you get these things on the king and queen of wherever, and it's like, who is this? Just they don't even write everything's capital or
Right.
you know, it's weird. So there's different flags you can find, right? So those flags you identify, and these companies teach you, because hackers are getting more and more sophisticated. Like I shared in the first session,
Right.
hackers are businesses.
Exactly.
Legitimate businesses somewhere. Could be, it doesn't have to be Russia, Ukraine. It could be China, the Philippines,
Okay.
could be Netherlands, wherever it is. There's companies. And they buy information that they share with you in the first session from the dark web. And the dark web was set up many, many years ago for governments to communicate to prevent secrets to be shared, right? But that has been kind of taken over by the employers themselves. So not the employers, but the attackers themselves. Right. So the dark web is an area where you find all this data that people are stealing.
Right, sure.
You can buy data. You want to buy data on, Target, you can buy data on Target. You want to buy data on RVN, you can buy data on RVN. You want to buy hacker data, Paul Hacker data, you can buy that. Because unfortunately, all of our information, Social Security numbers, previous bank accounts, checking accounts, credit card numbers, all that stuff they have. They have because previous breaches occurred. LinkedIn was a big one. Equifax, Target, Capital One, my wife's bank. I'm not going to mention the name of the bank. Every other year she has a new card.
Really?
Something's going on.
Wow.
Their information was stolen. Because you could be really secure as an employer, but you subcontract to people.
Okay.
A healthcare company is a perfect example of this. They subcontract certain services. What if their subcontracted vendor gets hacked? That can mean your customer's data was stolen. So there's this revolving door that's going on. So many more of these situations are occurring. So for my wife's situation, she had to get those different every other year. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's every 2 or 3 years she gets a new card. But something's going on. So that's kind of like a synopsis of previous session and kind of why you need multi-factor authentication and why you need to educate your employees. Because these hackers are very sophisticated. The things we teach you today, they're learning how to bypass.
Exactly.
So maybe next year we'll have 20 points on our checklist. Maybe 7 of the things on the checklist don't work anymore because they figured it out. So it's like a dynamic situation where it's changing, it's morphing. Because these hackers are getting very, very sophisticated. They have very sophisticated software, very sophisticated hardware. People that are like programmers, that are like experts and like savants in this area, and they know how to get in there. So we talked about MFA, multi-factor authentication. We talked about education. Those are really 2 key things.
Okay.
The next thing you got to do, you have to every piece of data you have in your company, on your computer, on your laptop, on the boss's system, what have you. Any data that's at rest, you have to encrypt that. Because if someone is in your system, and like we shared last time, a hacker would be in your system. If you don't have certain security protocols in place, they can be in your system for 6 months.
Right.
So if they're in your system for 6 months, guess what they're doing? They're
Stealing
finding everything.
Right.
And if you have data in there, you could have customers' PHI, or actually your employees' PHI, personal health information. You could have PII, personal identifiable information. That information is Social Security numbers, credit card numbers, bank account numbers, whatever. And they take all that stuff, all right? And that's scary, right? So, but they're in your, now, the third thing you need to do is, we talked about encrypting. I think a very important thing you have to do on top of the encrypting, you have to have backup your data somehow, and back it up outside your system. Because if you have your backup in your system or near your system on your server, that could be detrimental because they can get into that too. So you want to have a backup there. You want to have a plan of attack. Like if you get a breach or your systems are hacked and you have a ransom, what's your game plan? You have to have a game plan outside your system in a written document, not in your system. Because guess what? If your system gets hacked, you're unable to access that game plan.
Right, exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Sure.
So it's kind of like, I don't know, you watch a science fiction movie and something happens and then the captain comes out and they pull out a book.
Right, yeah.
What do we do next, kind of? That's kind of what it is. What do you do? How do we get our data back? Who do we call? Where is it, or where's our data at? Who's housing our data? Let's say you don't have that, or your backups aren't good. You have a choice to make. Am I paying that ransom to get my information back? If I'm at a hospital, I need that information for operations. Of course, I'm paying that ransom. And when you have a ransom, you have to alert all the authorities, FBI. You have to alert the police. You have to alert everybody. And it's embarrassing, but it happens. It happens a lot, more so than you think.
How long does it take normally for an employer to find out if they've been hacked or not?
Like I said, they could be in your system for 6 months. There's a program. There's a tool called endpoint data, and I get these acronyms all mixed up when I'm on this show for some reason. I don't know why, but it's called EDR, and endpoint response, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So endpoint detection and response. So what that is, it's kind of like it's a company called CrowdStrike. That's one of them. And CrowdStrike has varying programs from antivirus to monitoring, and every endpoint would be your laptop, computers. Everyone, it's all outlined. They know what's kind of like an octopus with tentacles.
Sure.
And that systems, you're all connected. And if they identify, okay, Jesus, we're getting hacked on Joe's computer. I'm not trying to jinx you here.
No.
It can shut down the network so it doesn't spread to everybody else. And they just stop your machine and they try to figure out what's going on there. So if an employer has endpoint detection and response, those types of services, it's being monitored 24/7. So if there is some activity going on, they can figure it out pretty quickly.
Okay.
Most employers don't have that. I'm working with brokers that give me deals to work on. No schools, not here, elsewhere in the country. No MFA, no data encryption, no EDR, maybe they're doing some education of the employees. They are like a hacker's dream to hack into. It's so easy, right? And they're like, we have to get insurance for these people. I said, great. My universe of carriers to look at that, because they want all these security protocols in place, has now dwindled down to 3. And of those 3, they're going to limit you. They're going to limit you on cybercrime. It's not going to be full. It's going to be partial. It's called sublimit. And they're going to say your deductible's really high.
Yeah, sure.
And we're only going to give you a $1 million limit because we know you're a prime target waiting to get, you're kind of like that tuna in the ocean, a wicked tuna, and you're going to get hit pretty hard. I hate to use that analogy, right? But that's kind of what's happening. So you need to have that because it's happening. So your question was how long? If you have that system, if you have an EDR program in place or a system in place, it's immediate. Okay. Now, sometimes people use managed service providers, and those are like kind of like the company we talked about earlier within your building. These people monitor. They have customers that it's like outsourced IT, right? They outsource this type of service too. We've had situations where MSPs, there's some really good ones out there, and some small ones, and they're not really monitoring. They're relying on a certain program, but no one's there to find out that someone's in your system. You have to have someone have a beeper, phone, something. When that thing goes off, an alarm, it's kind of like you're at Fridays and you're waiting for your dinner, and
okay.
That's a good analogy too, right?
Yeah, right, sure.
You get buzzed. Something's going on. You got to pick up that phone and figure it out. So if you're paying someone for those services, they're not doing it. They're not doing their job. But it's kind of like a surgeon on call.
Okay. Now, who in the company do you deal with? What department?
Well, for me personally, for sales, I'm dealing with the business owner.
Okay.
I think the next generation of insurance brokers, you really have to understand cyber. You also have to understand the other side of it, like what's going on and why is it happening and what kind of tools can you implement. A lot of brokers are great with workers' comp, auto,
right, life,
all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Cyber is like something that They may not be well versed. I'm not saying all of them don't know, but there's a select number of people that understand it.
Right.
But it's changing every day, So, yeah.
What's a specialty then, without a doubt?
You have to, I think the next generation, you have to be kind of like a morph of cyber insurance, cyber technology, and IT to understand their language, because the language in cyber is all backwards in my opinion.
Okay.
I'll give you for instance, this next generation of cyber warfare. They don't need to send you an email for you to click on to activate a malware virus.
Wow.
They can look at vulnerabilities in your system and access it that way. So it's kind of like,
Whoa.
Yeah, right.
On that note, we're going to take a
Yes,
quick
sure.
break. We're going to come right back with Paul Hacker and stick around and learn more about cybersecurity.
What makes a Wawa club? Is it the crispy bacon on the turkey BLT? The endless layers of flavor of the buffalo chicken salad? Or is it a secret handshake? Nah. At Wawa, there's a club for everyone. Find yours today.
We ride for those who died. The Police Unity Tour and RVN Television is bringing to you a show called On Your Honor, Straight Talk. And I'm your host, Patrick Monturi. I am a retired police chief from Florham Park, New Jersey, and I am also retired from the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in Washington, D.C. I am currently, for the last 27 years, the CEO and founder of the Police Unity Tour. And this show will bring to you straight talk about law enforcement, the actions and heroism that is provided to you, the citizens of the United States, as well as their actions in falling in the line of duty, as we could see some of the stories that surround that. Again, please watch us on RVN Television and be safe. Take care.
Well, welcome back to this segment of Coffee with Joe. I'm Joe Osamendi, your host. Once again, that's not the most important thing. Most important thing is the guy I'm talking to right now, and it's Paul Hacker, a professional liability broker at Access Insurance Services. And Paul, thank you so much for coming back again.
Thank you for having me.
We're talking about something that's so important, breach of data, and how much billions of dollars it costs for a company, right? Why don't we kind of walk me through this? Let's say, for instance, I get hacked as a business. How do I put a claim in? How does this work?
Well, first of all, usually your company, you have a broker.
Right.
The first thing you have to do is call your broker. You have to say, look, Johnny, Joey, Sally, Judy, whatever, I have a situation. What do I do? Because, in your policy, it says if you have a situation, you have to immediately let the insurance company know.
Right.
If you have a broker, the broker needs to know, and the broker then contacts the carrier, and or the broker may have gone to a wholesaler, and they contact the wholesaler, because we have two divisions in our company. And just real quick, a wholesale means that we have brokers that come to us for our expertise.
Right.
Because like I said, they're great at everything else, but not professional liability is not their niche.
Right.
Their niche is property or buy-sell agreements or what have you. I use that word. What have you. Anyway, so the first thing you do, they call you call your broker. Broker gets involved. I've had situations where the broker called the carrier themselves. If the broker went through us, you really have to get involved with the wholesaler, because we have a claims department, and we tender the claim to the carrier, and we get a claims adjuster on immediately. Because if in fact a broker went directly to the carrier, we don't know that. And if we're managing that piece of business with you, and we have a renewal coming up, and we don't know you had 3 claims, I mean, we do know if we look at the file, right? But we do it that way. If you went direct and you didn't have a broker, somehow, I don't know, something happened, you call your carrier immediately.
Okay.
And you let them know. If you think you may have been hacked, you have 2 things to do with us. We have a hotline you can call. It's a cyber hotline, and it's going to tap into a data breach coach that we use, and he and his firm uses is contracted with many carriers. So they know what they're doing. They're lawyers, and they have a hotline. So you call that hotline. If you think something happened, you've got that avenue too, free of charge. And they can say, well, yeah, this warrants it. You should definitely have, call Access if we're involved, and get them to start working that claim. But you have to do it, because the longer you wait, the longer the opportunity. The carrier could deny it. They can say, well, on your application, you put you have multi-factor authentication, but you don't. And that's another key area working with a broker. They gotta know what they're talking about, and they have to instruct their client. We've had situations, you look in the paper, you look in the insurance journals, Chubb denied a claim. Chubb's a great company. We use Chubb. They denied a claim because on the application that president signed said they had these security protocols in place. They did not. And they got hacked, and it was a rather large, I don't know the real number, was a large ransom event, and they had to pay out of pocket.
Wow.
Yeah.
See, this is why it's so important to have you on right now, because this is something that's going on. It's only going to get bigger, right?
It's going to get worse because everything we talked about today,
Right.
hackers are sophisticated enough, like we just talked about earlier, they're doing they're doing malware without sending you an email. They're finding vulnerabilities in your system.
That's amazing.
It's like IT warfare, for
Right.
lack of a better analogy. So they're finding vulnerabilities, whether it's, I'm not saying this is true, Microsoft, Apple, what have you, there's something in software, and they can even with the patches being applied, they can get in there somehow. I wrote down something, I read something, and I wanted to refer to it, and I can't remember the term they used, but in CrowdStrike, on their, and we have nothing to do with CrowdStrike at all, I'm just reading. CrowdStrike, in their 2023 global security report, they identified all these different tactics that hackers are now deploying that we thought we had under control. They could bypass MFA.
Really?
They can they have things that they can do, and that's a scary part of it. So you can do everything right as an employer, things we just discussed, and then because they've morphed into something differently, and you haven't been up on top of that morph process, they can get into your system, and that's the scary part of it.
Well, how do you keep up with that?
Well, you really need to read a lot, and I'm up 4:30 in the morning. It's quiet in my house. I read a lot. With a wife and 2 teenage daughters, it's quiet.
Okay.
And that's where I catch up my reading. Am I a late guy? No, but that's a whole different story.
Okay.
But I read a ton. You really need to have experts. I'm not saying I'm an expert. I'm an expert. I like to read about this topic, not because my name is Hacker. It's just because to me, it's very interesting. Like, why is this happening? What can we do to make it better? What can we do as an insurance brokerage to help our brokers understand and their clients understand? How can we streamline this process? So I'm always thinking about these things and bringing it to our team. We're talking about it. What else can we do differently? Really not to stand out as an agency, but really if we help our customers, sales is really simple.
Right.
You get the customer, you live up to the promises you made to the customer, and you do a ton of customer service.
Right.
That's how you keep customers. That's not rocket science here. It's not you churn and burn as an agency. You get this one, you lose it next year, you get it next 2 years later. That's a waste of time and money. So the things that we do as an organization, as an agency and as a wholesaler, we read a ton. We work with our carriers. We understand the nuances of the product. We educate our brokers that we work with. We educate our staff. My boss, Mike Smith, great guy. He tests us every day with emails. Through our MSP, we have a program. And let me tell you something. If you click on something you're not supposed to, you're back in rudimentary school to learn it again, because we want our employees, we sell this stuff.
Sure.
We've had, insurance carriers that have been hacked. How embarrassing is that?
Yeah,
How
really?
about brokerage firms, huge brokerage firms hacked? That's embarrassing, but it happens. The more people in your organization, the likelihood of them clicking on something, which is 90% of the time someone's clicking on to get into your system, before this new morph system that's happening, that's where you stop it. You teach, and you continue to teach and all that. And if you're not doing that with your employers, you're doing yourself a disservice.
Now,
Meaning,
every organization's vulnerable, correct?
everywhere, it doesn't matter if you're small, medium, or large. It doesn't matter. You've got different layers and levels of hackers out there looking and targeting companies every day, every hour. And again, I mentioned the individual who runs New Jersey. You got to get that guy here because he could tell you stuff you would not believe. Garrity, his name is Mike Garrity, I believe. So it's crazy. It really is, and you could do everything like I said and still be vulnerable. And that's why it's important. And we're not upselling here.
No.
You need to get some sort of coverage.
Right.
And coverage through your E&O, which is a small piece, it gives you a $100,000 limit, or your general liability policy. That's not cyber insurance. You need a separate, comprehensive program in place to cover you for what's going on. Because if you don't, if you're hacked, the costs that are involved with this, you can go bankrupt. And I shared that. I did have a client who was hacked, had a ransom actually. It was only $25,000 because of that situation. It freaked his client out, his largest client. And that client pulled out and he was out of business.
So what you're saying is the insurance services you have right now might not be sufficient to cover something like that, correct?
Well, there's a couple of things. We have to make sure that what you're saying as the employer is true on your application. Your application is a warranty. You're telling us, and you're telling the carrier who's insuring you that you have security protocols in place. And if you do not, and they'll scan you, they run scans. If they find that you don't have that and you lied, you don't have any coverage.
Okay.
I mean, it's not like, it's not like applying for auto insurance and they say, how many miles do you drive a year? 15 versus 5? They know. They'll go onto your system and say, well, wait a minute. I see these ports open. They didn't close these ports. We told them to do that. They may not cover that. So it's really a collaboration between the broker, the carrier, and really vendors that can help educate the employees. If you have those things in play, you have a better chance of having protection.
Sure.
And staying one step ahead of the hackers out there.
So a lot of times, business might not even know they have coverage, right?
Business may have some coverage, but it's not enough coverage.
Okay.
Because when you have the value-added coverages from a general liability policy or an E&O policy, they throw in something. You buy a car, we're going to throw in, mats. Whatever. It's kind of like that analogy, right? So they give you something, but if ransoms are $200,000 for mid-size, you only have a $150,000 policy, and it only covers third party, which means if your data, if you were sued, what if you had a data breach yourself? What if your system were shut down?
Right.
It doesn't cover first party, so it's not a full comprehensive program or insurance policy. You want to have first party, which what happens if something happens to my company, and have coverage for that, and you will also want to have third party. Well, geez, I leaked data somehow, and now these people lost money, and they're going to sue us. So you have coverage for that too.
So if somebody's interested in the cyber insurance and making sure they have enough coverage, they would call you, correct?
Correct.
And you would give them a valuation of what they have right now?
Well, I wouldn't know. They have to tell me what they have. We have this carrier, and this carrier is telling me they're not renewing me next year.
Okay.
Or I paid $4,000 for a $2 million policy, and my renewal's $18,000. I have to look for that.
Okay.
That's what but you really need to collaborate with your broker. Your broker has to either collaborate, they know what they're doing, or they're going through a wholesaler, and make sure they understand what's going on. It's not a transactional process only. This is an ongoing thing. So
I think the most important thing we're talking about now, and we're going to have you on again.
Yes.
Because you're going to have another segment. So why don't you give me a little bit of information what we're going to be talking about next?
Yep. Okay, so let's say you did everything right and you got hacked anyway. What are your responsibilities? And then we have a whole sheet. Well, I'll remember the points on the sheet. It's rather large, but what do you do? How do you do it? And I'll talk about it's kind of like a life of a claim.
Okay.
Meaning,
great.
What are the costs associated? I'll have the numbers. Like the data breach coach is X number of dollars per hour. Forensics is even higher. And then what if you need X, Y, and Z?
Okay.
And I'll talk about coverages, like what do you need in your coverage? Like they use terms like bricking. Bricking is like your systems got shut down and you need to order new equipment. That's bricking. Okay. But I'll go through some of those key points and we'll do that.
Okay, great. Paul, we're at the point of our show right now where I'm going to have you look right in this camera right here and tell people how they can reach you and who should call you.
Sure. Paul Hacker, Access Insurance Services. Unfortunately, Verizon changed my cell phone number. That cell phone number is 845-255-8044. You can reach me by that number. You can call me there, or you can send me an email at phacker@axis.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm always doing some article 4:30 in the morning about cyber. But thank you very much.
Paul Hacker, thank you.
Pleasure.
My pleasure. And I'll tell you, this is so interesting because it's so important. And a business can get hacked and get ruined like that.
It's scary.
It is scary.
Yeah, and people think they're not going to get hacked. And I'll talk again when we're together again. Everyone's moving to the cloud. You think you're 100% secure there, you're not. I'll talk about that as well.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for joining us on Coffee with Joe. We'll see you next time, and we're going to have another session with Paul Hacker.
Sounds great. Thank you very much.
You.